It is crazy how far we've come since we first started this channel, huh? One of our very first big projects was going through every single platinum game in the lead up to, at the time, what I thought was going to be Bayonetta 3's release date. Oh, how far off I was. Over that time, Platinum's dropped 3 new games and around 3 remasters with the likes of Soul Cresta, Astral Train, and the wonderful 101, just for some references. Oh, and of course, how could I forget the remarkable Babylon's Fall. Needless to say, with Platinum's current history, they definitely need a game like Bayonetta 3 to pump them back up in the good graces of the public. So after a quick glimpse of the game back in 2021, which left me... But that's Lappy. Shut up! Shut up! Finally! Pretty excited, and a mega dump of gameplay and news throughout 2022, we've arrived at the release of the Umbra Witch's latest title. Okay, so allow me to get this mini rant out of the way before we delve into Bayonetta 3's mechanics, story, level design, and overall analysis, if you will. A lot of my complaints about the gameplay stem completely from the fact that the game is marred by the dreadful hardware that is the Nintendo Switch. Performance of this game ranges from straight up bad to downright horrendous. Sometimes I get a stable-ish 50 or so FPS, but when monsters are on screen and summons are going off, we are oftentimes dipping into the low 30s and even 20s, making playing this game on harder difficulties, for me personally, borderline impossible. One of the main reasons for it being such a big factor is because this game has a heavy reliance on perfectly timing parries and using witch time effects and demon summon parries to the fullest of your ability. It allows you to do a lot of big damaging combos, sets up for some really cool stuff, and it is the crux of the gameplay loop when it comes to harder difficulties. Not to mention, personally, visually this game doesn't look as good as Bayonetta 2, and it mainly boils down to the lighting. Like, the lighting feels so flat here and just lifeless and kind of drab, especially in the early sections of the game. It definitely gets better as you make your way through it, but once again, I'm not blaming Platinum. This is completely Nintendo's fault for not giving them more powerful hardware to work off of, and since they're kind of pigeonholed to make Bayonetta for the Nintendo console, it's just frustrating at this point that none of my favorite franchises can get the proper visual treatment it deserves to help really elevate it one more step above being some of my favorite games of all time. Alright, sorry, mini rant over, let's talk about Bayonetta 3 now. We get a bit of narration about the search of the truth and how all paths lead to the truth, and what you do if you can meet other versions of yourself to uncover the truth. Throughout the monologue, we see Bayonetta boxing a shadowy entity with the help of a guy in military garb and a punk rock girl named Viola. Bayonetta puts up a fantastic effort, but ultimately loses to this deadly unknown entity. And this devastates Viola as she's forced to leave this world using a world bridge before the world itself is entirely destroyed. Cut to Bayonetta and the crew hanging in New York, grabbing some grub as Bayo drags Enzo on an errand to meet up with someone who reached out to her. They pull up to this cruise ship where all hell breaks loose. Viola drops out of midair into Enzo's car and urges him to help her find Bayonetta before passing out. Shortly after, Bayonetta boards a cruise ship and it's under fire from a new enemy type, neither demon nor angel, but something much worse, something man-made. This giant beast in the ocean summons a wave that engulfs New York, and destruction and death is everywhere you look. So y'all know what that means. Time for Bayonetta and company to get to work and uncover the truth to see what's going on with all this random alien invasion nonsense. With the brief synopsis out of the way, let's discuss the gameplay. It's classic Bayonetta fun with a bit of a heavier demonic twist. Bayonetta 3's gimmick is the Demon Masquerade system, where Bayonetta gets to summon a demon on the field, each with their own unique and complete moveset. So they have access to punches, kicks, ranged attacks with guns, and a special move with R. Experimenting with these demonic behemoths can shape up to be quite the good time when the game isn't actively fighting against you, which we elaborated on a little bit in the performance section. Bayonetta's core moveset is slimmed down from Bayonetta 1 and 2, but not to the game's detriment. A lot of the meat of the combos that came from combining 2 separate weapon sets like swords on hands and guns on shoes is now set to one singular complete weapon that lets you mix and match which demons you get to summon during combat. You'll quickly learn a lot of Bayonetta 3's gameplay is gonna revolve around the Demon Masquerade system and mastering it to its fullest potential. They're used as combo enders by pressing ZL at the end of a string, each with their own unique animations for enders which set up when you want to utilize certain combos. You'll use demons as well to break armor on various enemies, and they're used for platforming and general exploration, so you're going to want to get used to these guys. If you've played Astral Chain, then this system is basically made for you. It's as if every legion from the game was roided out of their mind and had a much more fleshed out moveset. For me personally, I feel like the Demon Masquerade system, while fun, had a couple of issues that kept me from fully enjoying it. For starters, I felt like during combat, the game's pacing came to a complete crawl when I summoned one, and I'm left standing still on the field as Bayo dances away and I clunkily knock heads with enemies on the field. Sure, it does a good chunk of damage, but it's not like I couldn't get done using the demon as a summon after a combo for either an extender or an ender, while keeping me much more involved and active in the fight. I know there's tricks to this, right? You can pull a witch time, summon your demon, go for a cool launcher, right? And then you could follow up with Bayonetta vanilla, but it just felt a little stale for me personally with the vast majority of the demons you unlock. To me, the only demons that felt really great was Madam Butterfly and the Fire Spider guy, along with some I won't spoil. I'd say about 2 more, mainly because they felt really responsive when dishing out attacks. Trying to do the same for the rest of them, and it felt a bit hard to control, where some of them, like the Train Demon, were downright frustrating. Yes, most are really cool concepts and they're fantastically unique, but the handful of really interesting demons I used were outweighed by the amount that were just kinda not fun due to previously mentioned issues. Oh, and the forced puzzle platforming segments that you have to play with when you get a recently acquired demon were always a bit of a drag. Like, they weren't really challenging, and calling them puzzles even is definitely a stretch. They just felt kind of tedious and there to take up time. You get a new demon, do 2 or 3 puzzles, 1 combat sequence to introduce you to how to use the demon in combat. It leads to a huge boss fight, rinse repeat until the last couple chapters where they throw that concept away and they just let you box enemies with the new demons you acquire, which, shocker, became some of my favorite parts of Bayonetta 3. Overall, it's not that the Demon Masquerade system is bad, it's actually, like I stated, quite fun, especially when I just select the ones I want to use and go absolutely buck wild. The issue is I don't like how it forces some of the slots that I want to utilize off completely to make me use a new demon that I don't really care for, and that happened quite often throughout the course of the game, and this isn't something replay value can fix because it's a story reason that you're going to have to use these things, and it forces you into using them for certain combat sequences and platforming segments, which once again makes replaying those chapters not that enticing for me when I want to go for that coveted pure platinum. Which brings me to my biggest gripe of Bayonetta 3 in terms of its gameplay and presentation. A lot of the game feels like a lot of tutorial segments and things that are trying to teach you these cool mechanics, and you're ready to use them and go absolutely wild, and then when you go to replay the game, it's like reintroducing these same exact mechanics to you on climax difficulty, as if I haven't already done this. Not to mention some of the strange gameplay changes they made from Bayo 1 and 2 to 3. Like, why did you change torture attacks? Like, I don't get, there used to be these fun, cool little micro mini games where you mash a little bit and get an extra award. It's perfect arcade-like experiences like that that make Bayonetta fun. But in this game, it's just a mini cutscene you watch. Like, why can't I mash A here while I ride this rocket into the bad guy? And since I'm on a little bit of a nitpick rant, why can't we mix and match weapons? You know how cool it would have been to have certain weapons that can, you know, maybe possibly debuff and buff you as you're boxing homunculuses with your 2 giant clubs? Like, that would have been a really dope mechanic. But instead, someone at the studio said, no, we're putting it all on red and making the Demon Masquerade system a good replacement for how players played the previous Bayo games. Part of the OG Bayonetta's loops for me was being able to switch between 8 different sets of weapons in the heat of combat and do some ridiculous combos that you just can't get with any other character action game. It also encouraged me as a player to often experiment with all my different weapon combos throughout the course of the game, which in turn made me want to level up every weapon skill. Now, please don't take too many of these criticisms to heart. I'm not like railing on the game or saying it's bad. These are just personal things that they took away from the game's overall fundamental design that's been there since 1 and 2 that I just didn't enjoy that much. There's still a lot to love about how Bayonetta 3 handles its combat, overlooking my personal nitpicks and gripes. For starters, as mentioned previously, some of the demonic summons are a blast to combo into and mess around with. Using Madam Butterfly in a kaiju style fight against larger than life foes is really sick. Same with Goromoth or that Dino Demon Fella. These sections of the games are exactly what I look for in a Platinum game, especially in a Bayonetta game like this one. It's campy, it's bombastic, and it overall brought joy to my life. When it comes to controlling them, minus the clunk, there's tons of fun to be had in the moment-to-moment combo creation, and expanding their move list always helps bring flavor to these combos and makes the recipes a lot more fluid and frenetic. Weapons are by far the highlight of the game once again. They are incredibly distinct from each other, which in turn adds a lot of replay value to mastering each one of their own kit. And thankfully, I found upgrading weapons in this game compared to previous Bayonettas to be quite a breeze. Enemy types are also pretty good. Like, there's one or two enemies that really grind my gears, mainly due to how kind of gimmicky they are. It's the jellyfish that splits apart a bunch and then sends missiles after you, essentially, if you don't beat them in time. And then the giant tower enemy that puts a force field up you can't penetrate without using a demonic masquerade summon. Aside from those two though, it's pretty standard stuff. Like, most of the homunculus are just slasher enemy, turn enemy, flying enemy, giant enemy that has a shield you gotta break. The variety of enemies is, you know, fine. Towards the middle of the game, there was a moment where everything just kind of clicked into place. Creatively using my summons to take out mob spawns, getting crazy airtime off certain combos and ending them with the demonic summon. And then the challenge rooms were really testing me to the limits. It was awesome. The level design in particular was a massive improvement over Bayonetta 1 and 2, despite my one gripe that I've already previously mentioned, but the larger exploration is great. It feels like every corner has some dope time manipulating platform segments, callbacks to the Angels of special verses you can take down, and lastly, of course, the climax challenge rooms that are scattered throughout the world. Before we get further into the video, I accidentally forgot to record my thoughts on the presentation of Bayo 3 because I was ranting about the Switch performance for so long, so real quick, it's very good. I think visually you could just see on screen that despite the Switch woes, it's a banger looking game. The UI is perfect, it's on point, and I like the new waypoint system they have where you could kind of point yourself in the right direction to just fully run through the game if you feel like. When it comes to the music in this game, once again, Platinum has knocked it out of the park. At first, I was a little bit ambivalent to these new tracks. I was kind of like, I don't know, man, they're all right. But as I kept playing the game and certain moments happened, it really fell into place and clicked. Like Moonlight Serenade, banger, bro. And even Viola's theme, which I was definitely not a fan of at first, grew on me rather quickly. Like, literally on the third chapter where you play as Viola, around that range, I was in there. I was like, heck yeah, baby, like, this theme is fire, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was gas. So overall, in that regard, it still has its classic Platinum charm, its classic Platinum feel, and that's something I feel like these games that Platinum's been making have definitely been lacking. Like, since the last couple we've had were like Babylon's Fall, Soul Cresta, and Astral Chain. So definitely needed something like Bayonetta to really reinvigorate my Platinum vibes. So all in all, despite some tiny nitpicks, Bayonetta 3 has awesome gameplay that easily lends itself to replayability, with the biggest issue of the gameplay boiling down to poor Switch performance, which isn't necessarily the game's fault, and secondly, certain level design and gameplay mechanic choices that they've made that detract a little bit from that replayability factor. But aside from those tiny gripes, and again, my personal nitpicks and biases with the game, it's overall a okay, so to hear my true final verdict on Bayonetta 3, please skip to this timestamp in the video and one in the comment section below. The next portion of this review is going to be discussing some sensitive plot points that involve the character Viola and the general cast. Ready to continue? Okay, let's get started. First things first, let me get out some of Viola's gameplay gripes for me. Like, personally, she's fine, I suppose. She's an anomaly of a character. Her moveset is basically a watered-down version of Bayonetta's, right down to her Cheshire summon being an auto-attacking beast that roams the field smashing everything in its path, as you have the ability to just go punch things to death. Her gimmick revolves around a parry system. With the proper timing of your R button, Viola will perfectly parry, giving her a bit of witch time, allowing her to do some awesome stellar combos. I brought up the fact that Viola is an anomaly because she just feels so basic in this game compared to the title character Bayonetta. Bayonetta gets to do a ton of awesome stuff, and Viola's just out here royal guarding simulating, essentially. Like, it's just kind of lame, and especially due to the Switch hardware that we're dealing with, royal guarding simulator just doesn't really work in 50 to 20 FPS. It's just not that fun. On top of that, we only get like 3 chapters you're allowed to play as her in the main game. I'm sure there's alternate chapters of things you get to see with the Umbria Tears, which I have yet to collect. I'm sorry about that, but for the most part, I'm going off of what the general first time experience is going to be, and you only play as her for 3 chapters at the end of the day, and it's kind of pathetic, especially considering how big of a role she plays in the plot, which we'll be diving into now. One more time, spoilers. So all of our timeline theories from 1 and 2 and our predictions and villain guesses just throw him out the window right now. Instead, we get this incredibly generic bad guy that has nothing to do with the God above or devil below. We just get this sci-fi guy named Sigurd, who wants to control all the multiverses and trick our main heroes into doing his bidding, which one is incredibly annoying that no one in Bayonetta's cast picked up on how sus this guy is, and two, is just a bad story setup. We already have established potential multiverses threats from previous games. Why does it have to be this random guy named Sigurd that no one has heard of and or cares for? And of course, the trifecta of characters, Luca, Bayonetta, and Viola. First things first, the reveal of Luca and Bayonetta being together was a bit of a shock to me. Like, yeah, they flirted a lot throughout the franchise, but I don't necessarily see them getting together as a pair. It just didn't quite click. I don't have any issues with it. It was just a bit of a shock. My second question is, how in the world did their kid Viola end up like this? She doesn't borrow any of her mom or dad's personality, isn't like her mom in her suave, nonchalant style, and definitely doesn't have her dad's dorky comedic antics. No matter how hard they try to shove the comedy down your throat, doesn't feel like they complete or do anything. They're just a giant gag character of the very concept of a new child being born from two title characters in a franchise. And originally I thought that was the archetype they were going with, as if it was going to deconstruct that ideal, like say a jab at Nero from Devil May Cry. But no, by the end of the game, once the credits finish rolling, she full on becomes the next Bayonetta, which is a title she definitely does not earn. She doesn't do much in the final battle, but get a lucky stab in after getting beat up a bunch. She has a grand total of 3 campaign missions and a splithering of cutscenes here and there, and she just felt like another like Mortal Kombat NRS jobber that somehow gets to land the largest role of her life. Not to mention, unlike Nero, she's just not interesting to follow in my opinion. I mean, sure, we could argue this is going to be a similar reaction to 2008's DMC4. Sure, pre-release people weren't the biggest fans of him, but once the game was like officially out in people's hands, they really came around to him relatively quickly and had all these theories about who he relates to and where he fits in the grander scope of Devil May Cry lore. Fast forward to 2019, he became the title character of Devil May Cry 5, and basically everyone I talk to is a massive fan of Nero. They love his no-nonsense, souped-up, edgier attitude that he brings to the Devil May Cry mythos. This shows not just in cutscenes, but also his gameplay, his angry and rageful way he slams his sword chaotically against the ground, viciously revving it up to do extra damage, and losing his balance when using charged moves that hit hard. This all goes down as to why we love Nero as a character, as it's not just things that we see in the story and cutscenes, but also in gameplay. Thus why Devil May Cry 5's ending hits so hard. Like, there isn't this big guessing game as to if Nero's really Virgil's son. It's literally one quick cutscene of Dante putting the puzzle pieces together, confronting Virgil about it, and they're both kind of like, man, that's crazy, and they get back to fighting each other as brothers do. And it's up to Nero to set his family tree straight and be the son that keeps the glue of them together. It hits really, really hard. That being said, I can't be the only one who sees this, right? Like, Bayonetta 3 feels like it was trying way too hard to emulate what DMC5 was doing, and it fell flat in almost every regard, making the experience just overall kind of frustrating. And Luca, don't get me started with him. He enters the plot, turns into a werewolf thing because of the truth, gets saved by his multiverse version of himself, and then sacrifices himself to open the portal once he sees the truth, I guess being his family, maybe, kind of? It's like, what a lackluster way to send off a fun comic relief character. Could it get any more depressing than this? Sheesh. Lastly, we have Bayonetta, which, like, okay, so Bayo's plot isn't really like good or bad. It's literally just so by the numbers and formulaic, which is 100% the issue. She's so her cocky old self, just a bit more sympathetic in this universe towards others, and she's sad when she sees like other Bayos die, but it's never enough to like distract her from the mission. Well, except for one segment when she had to like kill her multiverse mom, and that was sad, but they don't really elaborate or go further on it. It just happens, and then she feels a little bit sad, and then goes back to being her sassy, quirky self. It just felt like the tone of what we're supposed to feel for Bayonetta was all over the place. Like, we're supposed to learn something from these multiverse situations. Was she just there for the ride? Was it just circumstance? I don't know. And for the Egyptian zone that had so much lore and so much packed into one Bayonetta and her multiverse tells and fully explaining what's going on with her and giving her a full redemption arc, it just didn't make sense. Like, I do not understand what they were thinking when it came to building this multiverse storyline. Some places get in giant whole plot, others get literally 2 chapters of just fleshing things out, and then you get people that just get one, and they kind of keep it pushing, and it just felt half-baked. So we get to the big climactic ending ending with the beyond obvious villain reveal, and it's a really awesome time. You know, it's bombastic, it's epic. You have me going through space, then we're going to NYC, and we're really duking it out. It feels like some peak Kino Bayonetta activity. And then Bayonetta gets hit, you know, with a cheap shot from the villain that doesn't really deserve it because he's just some random, but, you know, whatever. And then Bayonetta is about to bite the dust, and then Viola appears and lets the whole audience know that she is indeed Bayonetta's daughter. And Bayonetta gets a pep talk from...
You didn't cry while I was gone, did you? You all seem to be having a good time. Awfully rude of you not to invite me, don't you think?
Bayonetta 1, Bayo, which, you know, her theme came back and that was pretty hype, and then Bayo 2 pops up and then you fight as Bayonetta 1 and you use the wicked weaves and it's a cool little moment and it's sick. And the fan service like this would have gone a long way throughout the entirety of the plot, and sadly, as quickly as this moment happens, it leaves. And then Bayo 3, Bayo gets rocked again, even though she fused with all three of them. And a black hole opens, and Luca sacrificed himself to save his daughter, Viola. And he sadly couldn't save Bayo from her demon going crazy because she got hit with a cheap shot from a villain that didn't deserve it. And then Viola has to cry as both her parents get clapped again. Roll credits as Bayo does an interpretive dance. What a I'm gonna be brutally honest, garbage ending. I'm sorry if I sound a little bit like an entitled fanboy here, but I just wanted to see something a bit more redeeming than this Bayonetta's last hurrah, if you will. It just doesn't work for Bayonetta or for Luca. It boils down to a couple of factors. It's because Viola is barely in the plot and the villain is just some generic scientist, like some guy literally ripped from Astral Chain. It's also because Bayonetta herself feels like she takes a backseat to all the multiverses shenanigans that are going on and these mini plots they have to cram in for each one of these Bayonettas into each chapter, leaving little time to flesh out her own character and even the stuff that's going on with Luca. So the sacrifices every character makes leaves a lot to be desired. Also, at the end of the day, in her own words, it's Bayonetta. Her losing to a nobody is insane, especially when she has the power of the other two Bayonettas that I grinded, learned, found all these dope combos with back in the day within her. And the more and more I've thought about it, the more and more upset I get. And that final cutscene, that family name cutscene, utter garbage. Never pull that nonsense again. At least the last dance was somewhat cute. So with all the story stuff out of the way, how do I feel about Bayonetta 3? Mixed. Very, very mixed. It ultimately is a game that's just screaming to be more. It's begging to be on better hardware, so mechanics and level design can feel a bit more polished and fun to engage with, along with a stable frame rate to really make combat feel that much more fluid. It's begging for more levels, so we could flesh out the plot a little bit and take times to polish things. Sadly, even if some of these things were patched up, I can't shake this strange feeling that at the end of the day, Bayonetta became the very thing it sought to avoid. Bayo 1 and 2 are campy fun character action games in a grindhouse B-movie way. They're loud, in your face, gory and obscene in all the best campy ways. Where Devil May Cry felt like a B-movie in the non-stop action way. Everything is campy, bombastic, and corny beyond belief, but they share a common trend. And that's that both of these franchises are made with a ton of heart. And in my opinion, at certain points of Bayonetta 3, through the Demon Masquerade systems and fun gameplay, it feels like it was lacking that. The ending in particular felt like it came off as a Rise of Skywalker-esque trilogy ending. Factory made to release during a hype season, ripping off ideals from more popular contemporaries without understanding what made the material it's ripping off of so great, and in doing so, completely missing the mark. Do I recommend Bayonetta 3? Surprisingly, yes. If you're just in it for the character action aspect and doing a bunch of fun combos and whatnot, and you quote-unquote don't care about the plot, then 100% skip every cutscene and have a bombastic good time. However, if you are like me and you do care about the stories in these games because you're a weirdo and you also enjoy how fun the gameplay that comes with them are, you're gonna, in my opinion, probably be a little bit disappointed by the overall finality of things. Like, I still think you should go play it and pick it up because I want to see everyone else's thoughts and your interpretations on the game's story and gameplay mechanics and all the other things I've mentioned previously in this video, because I'm a little bit torn on the direction it's taking. Overall, that's going to do it for me. My name is YungFalcon. I hope you guys enjoyed this long analysis on Bayonetta 3. I never thought I was going to do one on a game like this, but here we are. And thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you've played Bayonetta 3, no spoilers, or mark it with the spoiler tag, please. Comment down below what your thoughts were overall. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are we kind of in the middle about things as well? Just let me know what you guys think. And for the rest of you, please enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful time. And I hopefully will see you in the next one. Peace.